What is correct, Anaxa and Evernight? This is Reynolds coming back at you with another Honkai Star Rail video, and today we are actually going to be talking about some people that are very, very special. Whether or not I own them is irrelevant. So if we get into that, please. But before we get into that, please do not forget to leave a like, comment, and subscribe so we can continue to grow the channel. So maybe your boy can even be Heya partnered. But without further ado, let us get right to it. Alright, so who are we talking about today, you might wonder? Well, we're talking about sub-DPSs, so I'm sure the who that's spring to the forefront of your minds would be Mr. Anaxa and Miss Evernight. Fortunately, we don't have Evernight yet, but we'll get her eventually. Regardless, I just want to talk about how kind of glaze them a little bit, like how awesome they are, I think they're really, really cool characters. Like, ignoring all of their story stuff, like, we're not gonna say Evernight didn't have a great story, right? She did. And with Anaxa, but I'm mostly talking about kits today. So I'll start with Evernight. One of the reasons why I feel like she is, or just both of them are amazingly designed kits, right? Anaxa and Evernight both can be sub-DPSs for their intended teams, or they can both be the main DPSs. And this just feeds into why sub-DPSs in this game, at least these two, are really, really freaking awesome. Because now you have the ability to not only run them as the sub-DPSs, but now you have the opportunity to use them as main DPSs as well. I think this is really freaking awesome because they're not now, right? What this does is this gives them more than one way to be played. And I'm a very big proprietor of giving characters more playstyles. One of the reasons why Anaxa is also really cool later is because he's not just one guy, like he's not the super bright guy, he's not the sub DPS guy, he's not the main DPS guy, he does a lot, So now we'll get back into Evernight. One of the reasons I think she's really cool, as I said, another one of the really cool things that these characters do, right? Both of their buffs help not only themselves, but the team as a whole. So this just feeds back into why they're so well designed. Anaxa and Evernight both have the ability to not only buff the team, but buff themselves. So what this leads into is that because they do it both, right? You are able to do something where not only are they able to run as the sub-DPSs, which is mostly their intent, right? But since they buff the teams as well as themselves, as well, you can run them as a main DPS. And a lot of people are going to argue that Evernight and Anaxa are better as main DPSs. You guys can agree to disagree, it doesn't really matter. Point is, they can both be either. And I think that's just such really cool design on Star Rail's part. I hope they keep doing this with more characters. Like, supposedly Ashvale might be a sub-DPS, we'll see. Hopefully he's something where you can also use him as a main. We'll have to wait and see. But the way both of these characters do it is just so freaking awesome and very interesting that they thought that these would only ever be sub-DPSs. At least Heya seems like they did, right? So when we're talking, we'll just look through the hits a little bit and just explain why it's so cool, right? Okay, so go through her main traces first for Evernight. So when there are 1, 2, 3, or 4 remembrance characters, that increases the crit damage for all ally members by whatever percentage it says, 5% to 65%, while Evernight's skill lasts. So, since you're going to be running the remembrance core with Evernight, right? Just makes sense. This gives you the opportunity to either make her the main DPS, since it helps out everybody, or she can be the sub DPS, which helps out Casteries if you have her as what Heya wanted you to do with her. This is really cool. And then for the next one, increases Evernight's and Evie's crit rate by 35% for baseline, which is that's really cool. You don't have to build it as much. And when she uses an ability, it consumes 5% of her HP to increase crit damage for both of them by 15%, lasts for 2 turns, and then after Evie uses Dream Dissolving as due, recovers 1 skill point for ally. So on top of all this, she's skill point positive more often. Well, I guess she straight up is skill point positive because obviously don't have her, but she doesn't use skill points for any of her stuff, so that just makes her SP positive as a result, which is honestly awesome. So I guess we'll take a look at Dream Loving as due. About Dark the Night, Still the Moon, it increases Evernight's and Evie's crit rate by 35%, so that's just really cool. You don't have to build that crit rate as much, which is awesome. Then when she uses an ability, it consumes 5% of her HP to increase crit damage for the two of them by 15%, lasts for 2 turns. And after Evie uses their explosion, which is, Dream Dissolving as due, recovers a skill point for all allies, which just feeds into why she is actually just amazing overall. She's purely SP positive to my knowledge, because I don't think she uses any skill points at all, so she just recovers them for you, which is even better. And this Dream Dissolving is due, right? Whenever it's used, Evernight has to have 16 Memoria, which is how she gets her stacks. Once Evie disappears due to using this, it feeds into this parting beyond reach thing where when Evie disappears, it increases Evernight's speed. And then when it's specifically due to the explosion where, Evie sacrifices itself, I guess you could say, every point of Memoria that this thing had, or that she had rather, it increases Evernight's speed by 1%. And then it can be, she can get 40 points of Memoria count towards it, which is freaking crazy. And then Evie's also immune to crowd control, which is, it's cool. It's maybe not the biggest thing ever, but it is cool that Memo Sprites don't have a way to get stopped, at least to my knowledge. One of the other reasons that Evernight is so useful, right, is that everything she does not only feeds into what she wants to do. I mean, obviously, right, the character should have a cohesive kit, but this lets her be a main DPS since everything she does is really, really good for herself and the team, or it lets her get into the preferred, sub-DPS role that Hoyo gave her, where everything she does just helps out Casteries. Every time health goes down anywhere on the Remembrance team, it pretty much just helps Casteries out, so it's just even better. And then you can think about the synergies with Cyrene, where since Evernight has a Memo Sprite, the charging for Cyrene is just even faster. I mean, obviously you could use RMC, but we're in Elation now, so maybe you won't have RMC as an option that much anymore. That's why we're running her in the banners right now. But the fact that you get to pick is just really good on Hoyo's part. I hope they keep doing this. I don't remember if I said this, but when combat starts, Evernight gets 70 energy for her ult, and then gets Memoria, 1 Memoria. And when Evernight or an ally Memo Sprite uses an ability, Evernight returns 5 energy and gains 1 Memoria. So this is how you're going to be going. Again, another reason why this is good. If you're using Casteries, the dragon's going to help her charge up, which is going to help Casteries charge up, because then they use health to feed back into Casteries, then Casteries does the Memo Sprite for hers. Dragon blows up. Okay, now Evernight gets to keep charging. You guys can see the loop, right? So it's just, this can either be used as a main DPS or sub DPS, and it's just like, the world is your friggin' oyster. You just do what you want, I think that's about everything I wanted to cover with Evernight, though. It's just really, really cool. And, we're not going to argue, like, March isn't an awesome character, right? How can you hate that face? Even though it might be looking a little more evil and dastardly this time. But now we go on to Anaxa. Okay, so Anaxa is more interesting in the case where he actually just does so much. Evernight does a lot, but Anaxa arguably does even more in terms of just, like, the roles he can fulfill, right? So, off rip, I guess we'll just talk about his infusion. You know what, we'll just go by main traces again. So, based on the number of erudition characters, you get, so if it's just him, he gets 140% crit damage, and if it's 2 characters or more for erudition, it increases damage dealt by all allies by 50%. So guess what? If you're using him with Madame Herta, guess what? She just does more damage now because he just has it as a trace, right? Or if you want to run him as the main carry, which most people will want you to do nowadays, you know, whether or not you want to is, again, this is another reason why these characters are so cool. You don't have to play them how anyone else wants to play them. You can play them exactly how you want to. You want to run her, you want to run Anaxa like me most of the time and then just have him be a sub-DPS for Herta? Go for it. You love Anaxa, you think he's the best guy ever, you want him to be main DPS? Go for it. Who's going to stop you, you know? So that's just another reason. So next one, Roaming Signifier. When using a basic attack, he regens energy. Start of the turn, when there are no enemies in Qualitative Disclosure, which is part of his ult, he gets 30 energy. So, again, spamming abilities with Anaxa and just having him act as much as possible is going to just be good for your team as a whole, right? Because every time he attacks, he infuses a weakness. But what's even better is if you're running him with Madame Herta, okay, he's just gonna be a freaking battery running around the freaking place using all his abilities, getting Madame Herta even more energy so she can loop back. And since he's infusing weaknesses, there is a there's a really good chance that you can just ignore whatever the heck you were doing with weaknesses and you can just fight whoever you want. Maybe with the resistances, like, 20% when it's not an element that an enemy is weak to, yes, that is a concern, but the fact that you can even somewhat circumvent that by infusing weaknesses is just such an awesome thing. That's another reason why Anaxa is just really freaking cool. Honestly, there's not really a way to stop this guy. Like, the only way to stop him is if they toughness lock, and guess what? There's usually a condition to get that down. He's gonna have success. And another thing, when he infuses his weaknesses, that doesn't mean that he can't... Maybe he won't be able to weakness break, but he's still getting effectiveness out of his kit, because for this next one, for every different weakness type an enemy target has, Anaxa deals extra damage to that target that ignores 4% of their defense. Then up to 7... can act up to 7 times. So basically 28% ignoring defense. Just, because it's funny, I guess. Let's talk about a skill next. He does wind damage to one enemy, and then he has 4 more instances of damage, and each, it's a bounce skill, so there's 4 bounces basically. It'll randomly ricochet, as you guys know, but that's how bounce is. It just randomly ricochets, and then every single time that it hits, it'll infuse a weakness on an enemy. Another thing to note, it'll prioritize enemies that haven't been hit by it yet, so it's really freaking interesting, because at a certain point, you're either going to get wind for Anaxa himself to be able to toughness break, or if you're using him as a sub-DPS, or a main DPS, sub-DPS Herta, at some point, ice is going to get infused. And then for each attackable enemy on this field, if the skill has this damage increased by 20%. So, let's say it's, I don't know, 5 targets, you're having 100% more damage. So he scales with extra enemies too. There's another cool thing about this skill, right? You can use him as single target or multi-target. Obviously, the way bounce works, since it's ricocheting different hits, you're gonna tend to prefer to have it on one target, or less targets, that way it does more attacks on that target. It just makes sense. But this somewhat circumvents that problem by letting it deal more damage. I guess we'll talk about his talent next. Each time he hits an enemy target, so like damage instances. So again, this is the whole thing with his ricochet, right? It inflicts a random weakness type, lasts for 3 turns, with priority of the weakness type that the target does not possess. So guess what? You know how we were talking about the freaking face where he deals more damage when they have more weaknesses, right? Oh, he just gets the prioritized ones that they don't have yet to deal even more. So I'm sure you guys are seeing by now why Anaxa really is just that cool, that awesome, that amazing. And when Anaxa is on the field, he inflicts qualitative disclosure on the enemy that have at least 5 weaknesses. So there's 7 elements in this game. Slap them with 5, they have that. And Anaxa deals 30% increased damage to targets with this state. As if he needed even more damage at this point. On top of that, after he uses the basic aura skill on them, he will sometimes use an additional instance of skill on targets. I say sometimes, but it's like, okay, so they have qualitative disclosure and he's able to just... It's just that thing where he goes, and he goes again. That's what it is. And it's it doesn't use skill points. He just uses it for free. As if he needed even more in his kit to do well. And if an enemy has been defeated before this extra skill is used, he just uses it on the next one that comes up, like, okay. Now for his ult, obviously, there's this thing where he inflicts sublimation on the enemies and then, deals damage. It's an AoE attack as well, so again, another reason why he's really good in Pure Fiction and other stuff like that. And when they're in this state, targets will be afflicted with every single weakness in the game. All of them. All 7 weaknesses, he does this. So, as if he needed to freaking get even more. But and then if targets don't have control resistance, they are unable to take action in sublimation. So, pretty much this is effectively a stun. He basically just stuns the enemies if they don't have control res. Which is ridiculous. So you could think about it as something akin to the Ruan Mei delay. It's basically this. It works in a similar way. So, as if you needed any more reason for Anaxa to be nuts, dude. Oh, and then I guess we haven't talked about his technique yet, but we might as well. So he inflicts Terrified and they'll run away from him. And whenever you use this on an enemy, you hit them with whatever character you want to hit them with. It'll count as if you hit them during a weakness. And then it'll inflict that weakness every 30 turns. I know it's a lot, but Anaxa is just so nuts, dude. And then there's the fact that you can run this guy as a break DPS as well. He might not be the best ever, but the fact you can even do it is nuts, dude. Oh, you want to run him as a main DPS? Go for it. Sub DPS? Go for it. You want to run him into a fight that's not even wind weakness as a main DPS? Yeah, go for it. Again, maybe there's some other resistances, but you're going to have weakness break. That's going to matter a lot, He really is the Swiss Army knife, man. Like, there's not really much you can do to stop this guy. The only really real way to stop him is through toughness locking, which again, there's almost always, if not always, a way to make it so that the enemy is weak. Again, it would have a weakness broken. It's ridiculous. So I'm hoping that in the future they'll be doing more characters like these. But what's up? If you do have Evernight or Anaxa, tell me which way you play them. Do you play them as a sub or a main DPS? Then maybe why so? If you don't have them, do you want them? And that's all for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed. Please don't forget to leave a like, comment, and subscribe so you can keep the channel. And I will see you all in the next video. Laters.